good evening.
Hello.
We're here for Roots, and we're glad that you joined us. And so if you're part of IAGSM Assembly of God Student Ministries, then welcome back. And if you are new, maybe you got an invite or something like that, then we want to say welcome. And this is our class that we get together normally on Sunday nights at the church, but obviously with everything going on, we're having to do it virtually. So we are on YouTube, and we're glad that you joined us. And so my name's Greg, and this is...
I'm Danielle.
And so today is a very special day. We apologize, first of all, for all of the noise that you may hear, the cicadas. We tried to get out in nature, and I think they want to be on camera too, so at least audibly. Anyway, today is a special day for us because...
Yep, it's our 23rd wedding anniversary.
23 years ago, we got married.
Yes. So I twisted Greg's arm, made him put on our matching Star Wars shirts.
Yeah.
The I Love You, I Know from Star Wars with
Yep.
Han Solo and Princess Leia. So, yeah.
So I'm that guy. You're welcome. I'm that guy. Yeah, first year I probably wouldn't have done it, but after 23 years, it's been a good ride. So we'll just keep doing things that make it easy. So anyway, thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. And for those of you who may remember, we were in Romans chapter 12, and we were talking about Paul discussing things. And tonight we're going to talk about hard things. You know, there are some hard things in life. For example, do you know what your chances are of getting into Harvard? 5.2%. That's what the statistics say. 5%. Do you know that it is almost impossible to wiggle your ears? Cows can do it. You know, dogs can do it. Hippos can do it. But we not so much. No. How about do this? We'll give you time to try it. Try to put your elbow up and try to lick your elbow. Can you do it? It's nearly impossible. Most people cannot do it. Very hard things. What are the chances if you are currently right now playing baseball in high school? What are your chances of, actually not baseball, sorry, got my sports mixed up. Basketball. What are your chances if you are playing basketball in high school right now? What are your chances of going to the NBA? Do you know?
0.03%.
That's correct. 0.03% is your chances of going to the NBA if you are currently playing high school basketball anywhere in the United States. How about this? What if you are playing high school football in the United States? We just had the draft a few days ago. What is your chances of going to the NFL? Do you know?
Yep. Hang on. Doing the math. Yep. 0.08%.
0.08%. You better not bank on that check. That's a hard thing to do. Tonight we're going to talk about hard things. So Paul, in Romans chapter 12, picking up in verse 14, he mentions to those that the Christians in Rome, he's given them, if you'll remember from last week, he's given them instructions on how to live a Christian life. We talked last week about serving God. What does that really look like? You know, you maybe have heard that term and you think, well, maybe that means going to church and you know, going to church 3 times a week. I serve God more than someone who only goes to church 1 day a week. That's not what serving God means. Serving God is obeying God and doing the things week in and week out, whether you're at church, whether you're at home, stuck in this world that we're in right now, where you're stuck at the house, or wherever you're at, but doing the things and obeying what God has said for how we ought to live. That we ought to be different. We ought to really be different. I challenge you. There's some, if you go out on YouTube, not necessarily YouTube, but if you go out on Google, you can do searches and stuff about weird family photos. There's a bunch of weird family photos out there. Yeah, I thought about having some popped up or whatever, but there's some crazy stuff out there, and you're kind of like, man, that really stands out. That's how we ought to be as Christians. We ought to stand out. We ought to be different than everybody else and how the world responds. When I say the world, I don't mean, you know, the other day was Earth Day. I'm not talking about that world. I'm talking about those who know Christ versus those who don't know Christ. We who know Christ, we ought to be different. We ought to live differently. We ought to act differently than those who don't know Christ, because we have living hope. So anyway, we're going to start reading tonight in at verse 14, and we're going to go just a few verses through verse 16, and we're going to talk about it. Danielle's going to read it now.
All right, Romans 12, 14 through 16, and we're going to read out the New Century Version. Wish good for those who harm you. Wish them well and do not curse them. Be happy with those who are happy, and be sad with those who are sad. Live in peace with each other. Do not be proud, but make friends with those who seem unimportant. Do not think how smart you are.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start at verse 14. Wish good for those who harm you. Wish them well and do not curse them. Man, that's bad. I mean, that's hard to be able to do. In a situation where someone maybe has done you wrong, they have maybe in a relationship, maybe it's a situation where someone has physically harmed you. Maybe it's a situation where someone took advantage of you, not like in a bad way, but like in a situation where they knew that you wouldn't fight back on something, so they took advantage of your kindness, maybe. And Paul says, hey, don't curse them. And he's not talking about like, hey, you. He's not talking about that kind of curse, okay? What he's talking about is don't speak bad to them. Don't go around to other people and badmouth them. Again, that's what everybody does, and we ought to be different. And so,
I had personal experience with, someone rubbing me the wrong way, or I knew that they weren't really looking out for my best interests. And it does help if you pray for that person. It's hard to pray for somebody who has wronged you. It's very hard. But that's the first step, praying for them, and then your attitude, it does change. God changes you looking at that person.
Yeah. In those situations, a lot of times, it's more important to look at it and say, hey, instead of God trying to change that person, how can God use this situation that I'm going through right now to change me, to make me a better person for him? So he says that in verse 14, and then he says in verse 15, be happy with those who are happy and be sad with those who are sad. And then he says, live at peace with each other. So he's encouraging people, and he basically says this, hey, because here's the bottom line. How many of y'all have ever had a splinter in your finger? I hate splinters. I mean, I'm serious. I'm like a sissy when it comes to splinters. I am. I hate them. I hate them. I hate them. I'm telling you, it's like not normal how much I hate splinters. But the bad thing is it can be the tiniest little splinter, and it's in this finger, but my whole body hurts, even though it's just in this finger. My whole body feels that pain. And that's what Paul is saying, is that as Christians, those of us who believe in Christ together, we ought to be kind with each other. And if somebody's happy, then everybody ought to be happy. And if somebody is sad, then you ought to be sad with them and comfort them. That just because one person's having a bad day doesn't mean that they live on an island, but that we ought to be kind with them. And then it says that we ought to live in peace with each other. Because here's the thing, it's hard to live in peace with everybody, because I'm telling you, in life, people are going to rub you the wrong way. You're going to be in class with people who they're going to rub you the wrong way. They're going to spout their opinions. They're going to talk about this or that you just don't, and that you can't handle. Here's the thing, though. You've got to live in peace with those people. Don't talk bad about them. Live in peace with them. Be different. God's called us to be different. Y'all have heard me say that before. God's called us to be different. Not like everybody else. God's called us as Christ followers to be different. But here's what I know. If I choose to live in peace with Danielle, and Danielle chooses to live in peace with me, then we're going to have peace in our lives. But it's a decision. It's a decision. You've got to make a decision. Hey, the outcome is what I want, and that's peace. And I want that more than I want retribution or revenge or whatever. I want peace. And so Paul throws that out there and says that's how we ought to live. In verse 16, he wraps it up and he says, do not be proud, but make friends with those who seem unimportant. Do not think how smart you are. Do not be proud, but make friends with those who seem unimportant. I just remembered whenever I was a kid, there was a young man. He was a young man, but he was a good bit older than I was. He was probably in his early 20s at the time, but he was mentally handicapped, and his name was Matthew. And it was funny because at times whenever I would come around and stuff. I don't know why, but he and I just kind of clicked. And Matthew, even though he was not able to communicate very well, it was hard to understand him. But man, when he would see me, I don't know why, but he would get so excited. He would run over to me and he would like talk to me. And like I said, it was really hard to understand him, but I tried to understand and but he was so friendly because of the fact that there was one time, I guess the first time that I had showed friendship to him, and I was just nice to him, and not because I'm trying to pat myself on the back, but it just shows the fact that people respond to that, and we have to be careful in situations where we think that we're better than other people. And Paul clearly says to the Christians in Rome, and I believe that he's saying to the Christians, in Crawfordville, do not be proud, but make friends with those who seem unimportant. He didn't say they were unimportant, but in this world's eyes, those who maybe seem unimportant. Because I tell you, in that relationship, in that friendship that I had with Matthew, I got more out of it than he did, I'm sure. Because every time I would see him, he would come over and we would talk, and it was just a neat thing. I got more out of it, I guarantee you, than what he did. And then he wraps it up and he says, do not think how smart you are. And that can be difficult, and especially if you think you've got all your stuff together. Because if you've got all your stuff together, at least in your mind you think you do, it can be easy to look down on other people and say, well, start nitpicking and so forth. Don't think you're smarter than other people. Really is a key thing. Because we all make mistakes in this life, and don't judge on others and so forth like that. Jesus was, there was one instance in the Gospels where Jesus goes to his disciples and he washes their feet. And we had a former pastor who preached this sermon, and I remember it. And he basically said this. He says, Jesus washed feet. Jesus, the Son of God, washed his disciples' feet. It's kind of a demeaning servant's task. And what he says is he said in that sermon, he says, Jesus washed their feet, and he says, I guarantee he didn't say, Peter, how come you don't take care of your feet better than this? This is dirty. I'm having to get all my hands all dirty because of this, and because of the fact you're not taking care. And the question that was asked in that sermon, I still remember it, is he says, are you a foot washer or are you a foot inspector? Do you try to judge and pick out other people? Because when you do that, you are trying to put yourself in a higher position, saying that you are smarter than they are, and that you're better than they are.
Yeah, if you choose the route of humility and being humble, you will never choose the wrong route.
Right. So here's the challenge tonight. This is what I want you to do. I want you to take some time. Now, this is going to take some time, but I really want you to do it. Here's a chance for you to grow spiritually as a follower of Christ. I want you to take about 5 to 10 minutes sometime tonight when you're watching this. I want you to go to your room. I want you to get a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to write down 3 to 5 instances based off what Paul was talking about in Romans 12, verse 14 through 16. Read what the instructions were that we just read through that. Read through that again, and I want you to write 3 to 5 instances, and it may have to be something you kind of make up. Hey, if I had a friend who was doing this or whatever, then this would be how I would respond. But put yourself in that situation and say how you would handle that situation. Because if you will put yourself in that situation, and even, like I said, it's going to be a made-up hypothetical situation. Hey, if I've got, a friend at school who's having a bad day, then this is how I would respond. But if you write that down on purpose, I guarantee you the next time when you're in that situation, you'll be reminded of this, and you'll say, hey, I can respond the way that I'm supposed to respond. Whenever we were kids, there was a show still on, Sesame Street. Many of you might have watched Sesame Street. But they had this thing, and as part of the show, I don't know if they still do it, but they would have the screen would be broken up into 4 parts, and they would have kids doing different things. Or they have one kid doing something different and 3 kids doing the same thing. And they would sing this song, one of these kids is not like the other. Come on, can you tell which one? Go look it up on YouTube. It's good stuff. Anyway, but one of the kids was doing something different. That's what we ought to be. We ought to be the ones who are different. Not like everybody else. We ought to respond differently, and I challenge you to do that. Okay? So go do your assignment, write it down, and think about it. Hey, how am I really going to respond? Now, as far as we don't have a contest tonight.
No, we're just going to add on to what Pastor Jeffrey asked on Wednesday night. I don't think he's gotten a lot of pictures of pets. So go ahead and send him a picture of your pet, and he'll be picking a winner soon.
All right. Anyway, hope you guys have a great week. Go do your assignment, okay? Don't let this slip by. Use this as a chance to grow. All right. Love you guys, and we will see you next week.